Hey everyone, welcome back to another tier list. Today, as you can see, we'll be ranking the films of Robert Rodriguez from worst to best on this list with an S through to F tier. So the guy's got quite a few films. I went through a phase about a year or two ago of like trying to watch all of his movies. He's got a lot of really over the top, crazy violent films, as well as at the same time having a whole heap of family-friendly kids films, but like really kiddie films, like for young kids. So he's got quite a wide variety and range of films. A lot of Mexican style films where they're very over the top and silly and funny, and but he definitely has his own unique style as well. He also likes to go for low budget kind of looks as well, especially early on in his career, as well as his kids' films. A lot of the visual effects are quite dated and really poor looking, to be honest, like a PS2 game cutscene. But there are some films that I really do like from this director, but for the majority, there's a lot of stuff that I'm not into either. So we'll just get straight into it. So first up, we have his first film, El Mariachi. This is a real low budget film, like super low budget. And a lot of people are very impressed by this film being his first movie and everything. I wasn't that keen on it, to be honest. A lot of directors that I like, I'm not really into their first films, like, Spielberg or Scorsese or Nolan, Aronofsky and all of those guys. And same here, like I wasn't really into El Mariachi. I kind of saw what they were going for, but at the same time, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't really good. So I'll probably put it in the C tier. Also, there is a bit of give him some credit for it being his first film and it being impressive in some ways for having the kind of minimal budget that it had, and being able to pull off a few things that it did for that budget. But his next film, a couple of years later, we got a sequel to that movie, which is called Desperado with Antonio Banderas and Salma Hayek. And that film had a significantly bigger budget, I think. I do remember enjoying it more than El Mariachi, but I still didn't think it was like one of his great films. I'll probably put it in the B tier because it was worth watching and definitely an improvement, in my opinion. So yeah, a lot of these films I'm not going to be able to go too in depth on because I've only seen them once and it was maybe a couple of years ago. So story-wise and characters and things like that, I probably won't be able to go into as much as I normally do. But I do remember kind of my level of enjoyment, at least, of all of these films. So this is kind of like a trilogy. So you got El Mariachi, Desperado, and then Once Upon a Time in Mexico. And I enjoyed Once Upon a Time in Mexico quite a bit as well. I'd probably put it equal to Desperado there. And you've got a really great villainous performance, over-the-top villain performance by Johnny Depp in this film as well, which is a lot of fun. But yeah, as far as this trilogy goes, I'm not a fan really of El Mariachi, but I do enjoy Desperado and Once Upon a Time in Mexico. But like I said, they're in the B tier, so they're good, but they're not great. Next we have Alita Battle Angel. This is pretty much the only film he's done with a really big kind of Hollywood scale budget and size. A lot of his films that have a very visual effects heavy kind of look really cheap, but this film actually looks really good. Yeah, I guess because it was also kind of written and produced by James Cameron, so it's obviously going to look good and have that higher budget kind of sheen and quality to it. So I'm going to put Alita. I'll put it in the top of the B tier as well, I think. I did like it better than those films, but at the end of the day, it's kind of it's an above average sci-fi action adventure film, but it's still like not a top tier one or anything like that. But it was very enjoyable and it had some really memorable sequences and action scenes and things like that. Next we have From Dusk Till Dawn. This is another early one and it stars Quentin Tarantino as well as George Clooney. And it's a vampire movie and it starts out as a very straightforward kind of story. It doesn't even turn into a vampire film until halfway through the movie, and then suddenly, pretty much just as a light switches on as quick as that, like it turns from one style movie into another. And I did like that about it and I thought it pulled it off pretty well. I know a lot of people love this movie and would probably put it up higher, but again, this is another one for me that I would put in the B tier. Still a solid film. And I think Quentin Tarantino also wrote the film as well. So he did a few films in the 90s that he wrote but didn't direct and all that, and this was one of them, like along with True Romance and Natural Born Killers. So next up we have the two Machete films. So these movies really lean hard into that over-the-top, silly action Mexican adventure style that he goes for. And I actually really enjoyed the first film. On this tier list, I'm actually going to put it in the A tier because I think the first Machete is actually a really fun movie. I think there were so many sequences that I was just laughing out loud during this movie, and the action is so over the top and stupid but fun at the same time. And it's pretty much Robert Rodriguez doing his thing and doing it well here, because a lot of the times it just comes off gimmicky and cheap and too trying too hard. But this film here, it really works with. Unfortunately, though, the sequel couldn't hold it up. I didn't really like Machete Kills. While I like the first film, the second film really kind of detours downwards into that style that he does that I was mentioning, where it's just like it doesn't really capture what he's going for 100%. They've kind of really run out of ideas by this film. I'm going to put it in the D tier because it was pretty bad. There's still some fun to be had with it, I guess, but when you compare it to the first film, it's pretty bad. Yeah. So next up we have Planet Terror, and this is actually one of my favorite Rodriguez films. This is him doing a real gritty kind of grindhouse film, and it's like a zombie invasion horror film, and it's really bloody and gory and over the top, but in all the best ways. It's easily one of his best films. I'm going to put it at the top of the A tier because, yeah, Planet Terror, it's one I've got on Blu-ray. I just think it's lots of fun. I've only watched it once, and I really actually want to get around to watching it again, but it's one of those films like Machete that's just so silly and over the top and crazy, and the violence is just so extreme. But again, I laughed so much watching this film and just had a great time with it and really enjoyed it quite a bit. So yeah, Planet Terror is definitely one of his best films. So next we have Shorts, and this is one of his kids' movies. So like I said, he does a lot of over-the-top violent films, but he does a lot of kids' films as well. And I'm not really a fan of his kids' films. Even when I was a kid, like I grew up with the Spy Kids films, and I always enjoyed the first one, but everything after that, just nothing really meshed or clicked with me. And Shorts, I didn't see this one when I was a kid, so watching this one now, it just kind of, look, I'll put it in the C tier because it has an interesting concept, and I can see watching it from a kid's perspective, it would probably be a really fun movie, and things like that. But obviously as an adult, it just doesn't work. There's a lot of kids movies that do work for adults, but Robert Rodriguez's kids films aren't designed to work for an adult and kid-friendly audience. It's pretty much just aimed at kids and the dumbness and silliness of what would entertain them. But yeah, Shorts wasn't awful, but it definitely wasn't good either. So next up, jumping from one of the worst to easily his best film, that is Sin City. Sin City is a fantastic movie. It's easily S tier. It's kind of like the one film in his whole filmography that just is leaps and bounds ahead of everything else he's made. If you haven't seen any of his films, or you've just seen his kids' films growing up, definitely check out the first Sin City because it's an excellent, gritty, black and white, film noir, mystery, thriller, action kind of film. And it just has this great sense of mystery to it. And it's got that old school film noir style, but also mixing it with modern kind of green screens and CG and things like that. And he does that style where everything is kind of fake backgrounds and fake blood and things like that. But this film actually works in because it's shot in black and white and it's very stylistic. And so his style surprisingly kind of meshes really well with the material here. And I really just like the setup of the Sin City universe, how you have these kind of mini stories and escapades all going on at once, and you're flashing back and forth between different storylines and characters. And the first film, just like every storyline's perfect. Everything about the movie is fun and enjoyable and shocking as well and gritty. And like it just, like the characters are so great and it works so well. And yeah, it's really easily his best film and I really love it. And I would love to see him kind of come back and possibly make a third film. I don't know if it would be any good though, because the second film is considerably lesser than the first film, but still I just love that first movie and there's pretty much nothing wrong with it in my opinion. Like it's a perfect film. But that being said, we got Sin City: A Dame to Kill For, the sequel. I like the movie. A lot of people don't like the film because it's not that first movie. And if you go into it expecting the first movie quality, you're going to be disappointed because it does the same thing where there's a bunch of characters, a bunch of different storylines going on, but none of them are quite as interesting or involving as the ones in the first film. And the style is also, it looks a bit more fake in this movie than it does in the first film for some reason. But there's still a lot of enjoyment to be had with it, and Honestly, I'd still put it in the A tier. I'll put it below Planet Terror though. Yeah, for this list, it's going in the A tier because compared to his other films, it's much higher in my opinion. I know a lot of people don't like it, but yeah, for me, it still works, but just not on the level of that first film. So next we have all the Spy Kids films. So there's 5 of them now. And as I said, I was a kid when the first couple came out. I enjoyed them, especially the first one. So look, I'm going to put the first Spy Kids in the B tier because it still holds up pretty well as a kids film. It's the first kids film he made, and it's easily the best of his movies in that genre. It just works better, like his other films got too silly and too dumb and too childish, whereas this one, it kind of is a bit smarter and has that kind of sense where adults can watch it with the kids and still kind of enjoy it. But the other films don't really have that, unfortunately. So the first one's good. I'm going to put it in the B tier. They get progressively worse. Like Spy Kids 2 and Spy Kids 3, I'll put equally in the top of the C tier because I was still a kid when they came out. I enjoyed them when I saw them, but then I just kind of forgot about them. But also being able to kind of revisit them a little bit lately because I have a 5-year-old son who likes the Spy Kids films now. I can kind of see it from that perspective again, which is cool. But just looking at them as films from an adult perspective, there's not much there, to be honest. Spy Kids, 2 and 3, they're okay. Spy Kids 4 is probably the worst film he's made. I just remember it being awful, terrible, nothing about it that I enjoyed. I hated that film. And Spy Kids 5, Armageddon, which is one of his most recent films, is maybe slightly better than 4. I'll put it in the D tier. My son has watched that one quite a bit, so I've seen that one a few times. And then we have another kids' film called We Can Be Heroes, which is kind of a spin-off actually, or not really, but it's got characters linked to Shark Boy and Lava Girl. So that is another one that I'd probably put in the D tier though. Again, that's another one my son likes, but yeah, for me, these films all just kind of blend into one another because they just feel like the same thing. And then we have The Adventures of Shark Boy and Lava Girl. This is one that came out when I was younger as well. I remember hating this film as a kid, and I grew up after that. I never watched it again, but I just always hated it in my mind. And then it's another one that my son got into, and so watching it again with him and how much he loves the film is kind of funny because, I really disliked the movie. But I can see where he's coming from as well at that age. So, but for me personally, I'll put it at the bottom of the D tier. Like it's kind of creative, but like for an adult, there's nothing there. And so last 2 films we have. First one is The Faculty. This is another one, early film he did in the 90s. And this is actually one of my favorite films of Robert Rodriguez. It's actually my second favorite film, so I'm going to put it above Planet Terror in the A tier. I remember watching this a couple of years ago for the first time, and it's just one of those real fun, like, revisiting of like a B-grade sci-fi horror, body horror kind of film, but with a 90s spin on it. So it's got like Josh Hartnett and everything, and a lot of famous faces that you'd see in films of that era, around this kind of Scream era. And it's just a lot of fun. Like, I really like The Faculty. I think it's a really great film. It's another one that I have on Blu-ray too, and that I like to watch every now and then. It's silly, it's over the top. It doesn't have like the crazy CGI that he was known for later on. It's kind of earlier in his career where he did a bit more practical effects, which is cool. But yeah, it's just such a fun film, and it works really well as that kind of late 90s B-grade sci-fi horror teen kind of film. And yeah, it's a really good movie. I would really recommend that one. And then lastly, we have another of his most recent films that came out last year, I think, Hypnotic with Ben Affleck. I was pretty keen for this film when I heard about it and when I saw the trailer and things, but after watching the film, it's just a super like forgettable, average, run-of-the-mill kind of movie, which was disappointing because it's got this high concept kind of idea, but it just doesn't pull it off. It doesn't work or make it interesting at all. Ben Affleck was okay in the movie. I would have only watched it like a year ago or so, but I really can't remember much about it. So it was just kind of a forgettable, bland kind of movie. So again, it wasn't bad. I don't know, I'll chuck it up the top of the C tier because it wasn't awful or anything like that, but it just wasn't memorable, and it was quite disappointing. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that's it. I know he's worked on other films, as writers and producers and things like that, but this is the main bulk of Robert Rodriguez's films, guys, and as you can see, it's a very mixed bag. There's literally multiple in every category, just about. Personally, I love Sin City. I'm also a big fan of these films in the A tier. They're all really good movies. Everything in the B tier is okay, like I could watch it happily and be entertained, but in the C tier and below, it's just kind of average stuff to terrible stuff, which most of his kids' films seem to fall in that area. So yeah, I'm not sure what he's doing next. Actually, I've heard there might be a third Machete film, like Machete in Space or something like that. So that would be pretty interesting, as long as it kind of, lines up more with the first film, hopefully. But yeah, I'd like to see what he does next, and I'm always going to check out what he does because he's an interesting director. He does a lot of different styles, and he's instantly recognizable as well, which is one thing I really like about filmmakers. So thanks for watching this video, guys. Let me know your list down below if you have one. Please subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.